Good morning guys, and welcome to today's worked exam answer video. Today I'm having a look at another calculation question, which this time involves a little bit of group 2 knowledge as well. So we've been given a mixture of two different group 2 chlorides, which we are then reacting with sulfuric acid. We need to understand which of those is then going to form a white precipitate and use this information to help us to work backwards to calculate the percentage by mass of one of the group 2 chlorides in the original sample. So I'm going to use two different colours for the two different group 2 chlorides, and then I will do my worked answer and come back and explain each of the steps of this question to you, because again there's a couple of places that I feel like you may fall down, because when I was doing this I had a momentary lapse of thinking I could do something that I definitely could not, so I will make sure that I highlight that to you guys as well. So back in a sec. Okie dokie, so the student was given a powder made from a mixture of anhydrous barium chloride and anhydrous magnesium chloride. The student dissolved 1.056 grams of this mixture into water in a conical flask and then added an excess of sulfuric acid. A white precipitate formed, and that was filtered off, washed and dried, and the mass of this solid was 0.764 grams. We have to identify the white powder, or the white precipitate, sorry, and calculate the percentage by mass of magnesium chloride in the powder. Now, the first thing that I did when I was reading through and doing this question for myself first, before filming this video, was I presented the information in a different way to how it's written in the actual question itself. I am quite a visual person. I like to get the key parts from the question out of the question and into my own working in a way that kind of works, I guess, for my brain. So the first thing I did was I wrote down the two formulae for the anhydrous barium chloride and the anhydrous magnesium chloride. Then I wrote the mass of the mixture for the powder here, and then I wrote underneath that to these two substances we're going to add sulfuric acid. And then I thought about what the products of those reactions would be, and this is where our group 2 knowledge comes in. Barium chloride reacting with sulfuric acid is going to make barium sulfate. Magnesium chloride reacting with sulfuric acid is going to give us magnesium sulfate. Now it tells us that a white precipitate is formed here, and we have to identify what that is. The white precipitate is barium sulfate, and I know that because the solubility of group 2 sulfates decreases down the group, and the opposite is true for hydroxides. So in terms of how I remember both of those trends, I remember that barium sulfate is my white precipitate, and we need to know that because when we're testing for the presence of either barium or sulfate ions, this is the white precipitate that we get. So therefore the solubility of the group 2 sulfates has to decrease down the group, and I then remember that the hydroxide trend is opposite, so the hydroxides get less soluble as you go up the group. So that means that barium sulfate is the white precipitate, and we're told the mass of that, 0.764 grams. Now at that point I was like, okay, if I know the mass of the barium sulfate, then I know the mass of the barium chloride, and I've got the mass of the powder. So for a brief second I was like, oh yeah, I can do 0.764 divided by 1.056. Or rather, I recognised that I actually wanted the percentage by mass of the magnesium chloride, so I'd have to do the mass of both of them, take away the mass of the precipitate, and then divide it by the total mass. But then I was like, of course you can't do that because this is a mass. And whenever we're comparing the amounts of substances kind of made in a reaction, we need to use moles, of course, and the reason for that, these masses are not going to be the same because they're not going to have the same MR. So once I had engaged my morning brain, I wrote myself an equation to show how barium chloride would react with sulfuric acid to give me barium sulfate, and then 2 lots of HCl to balance the equation. So the barium chloride and the barium sulfate white precipitate are in a 1-to-1 ratio. I used the mass of the barium sulfate and divided that by the MR to get me the number of moles of barium sulfate. Because, as I said, that's in a 1-to-1 ratio with the barium chloride, the moles of the barium chloride is also going to be 3.27 times 10 to the minus 3. And once I'd worked out the MR of that, I could times them two together to get the mass of the barium chloride, so 0.682 grams. That, plus whatever the mass of the magnesium chloride is, would give us the mass of the powder. So I could then do 1.056 take away 0.682 to work out that the mass of the magnesium chloride in that mixture of those two substances was 0.374 grams. And then to get the percentage by mass of the magnesium chloride, we want to do the mass of the magnesium chloride divided by the mass of both substances, which we were told is the 1.056 grams, and then times that by 100, and that tells us that in that white powder, 35.4% of it is magnesium chloride, with the rest of it clearly being barium chloride. So, a couple of things. Don't be scared to rewrite out the information in the question in a way that works for you. 2, whenever we're thinking about comparing the amounts of substances in an equation, just a little reminder, because I clearly needed it today, that we have to do that in terms of the number of moles. We cannot compare masses because unless it is the exact same compound or an isomer of the compound when we're thinking organically, they are going to have different MR values. So therefore we're going to have to work out the moles, use the ratio to then enable us to get the mass of the either reactant or product, and it was the reactant in this case. Also, don't be scared to use colour when you're highlighting in the question. I know you can't use colour in your answer, but perhaps colour in the question would be sufficient to help here. And yeah, then there's that group 2 knowledge as well that we needed here. Hopefully I've explained that lovely and clearly for you all, but if anything needs any further clarification, please do not hesitate to get in touch, leave a comment, send an email, whatever works for you. Okay? Hope you all have a really great day, guys, and thank you so much for watching.